Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for Livable Future Live, our monthly virtual education series. We're really glad that you're all here tonight for this important conversation where we'll be talking about the environmental impacts of crypto mining. My name is Kate Schwanhauser, and I am the Special Events Manager here at Food and Water Watch, and I'll be your facilitator for the evening. So as everybody's getting logged in, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, share your name and where you're joining us from. And while you do, I'll go over a couple of quick housekeeping reminders for the evening. So as I mentioned, the chat box is open. So after you introduce yourself, please continue to use that chat box during the event to share your thoughts and reactions as we listen to the discussion tonight. And if you have a question for our speakers, if you have a question for our speakers, please use the Q&A box instead of the chat box. That'll just make it a little easier for us to keep tabs on those questions for when we get to the Q&A portion of the evening. If you need to turn on closed captioning, please click on the closed caption or live transcript button on your Zoom toolbar to turn those on. And finally, I am recording today's event, so I will share that later with everyone who RSVP'd. So for those of you who are new here, Livable Future Live is our monthly virtual education series. So each month we focus on a different topic related to food, water, and climate, and dig deeper into the issues with our speakers. It's a great way to get more information and learn how you can take action. So I invite all of you to join us again for some of our upcoming events. So next month, on November 16th, we'll review the results of the election and our goals to keep pushing for critical environmental legislation. Regardless of the outcome of the midterm elections, Food and Water Watch will continue to do what we do best, which is organize and fight to protect our communities and our planet. And then in December, we'll be looking back at the year to highlight some of our most important victories and how this sets us up to build on that work in 2023 and the important role that you play in those campaigns. These successes happen because of your incredible support and activism, and it's important to take time to celebrate that. So we will put the link in the chat where you can sign up for these and other upcoming events in the Livable Future Live series. All right, so let's get to today's topic, cryptocurrency, crypto mining, and its impacts on our environment. Spoiler alert, crypto mining is worsening the climate crisis, and through our discussion with tonight's speakers, we'll get into the details of how and why, and we'll also talk about how Food and Water Watch and our allies in New York are working to pass a moratorium on crypto mining in this state. But first, to start things off, I would like to introduce my colleague, Kat, who is one of our researchers. And she's going to set the stage for us by sharing a really helpful introduction into just what exactly cryptocurrency is and what we mean by crypto mining before we dive deeper into this discussion with our panelists. So hi, Kat, thanks so much for being here. I'll turn things over to you to tell us more.
Great, thank you so much for having me. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a quick little presentation to go along. So hopefully everyone can see this. And like Kate said, I'm just going to be doing a brief introduction, a pretty high level introduction into what cryptocurrency is and what the major environmental impacts are that are of concern. So at a very basic level, cryptocurrency is a digital and decentralized money system. It's very unlike traditional currency. It's not backed by any government guarantees or any sort of physical assets like gold. The value itself is determined by algorithms and demand with no actual guarantees behind it. And there are over 10,000 variations of these coins or these tokens, with Bitcoin being the market leader and the industry standard. And probably, if you've heard of one, it's probably going to be that one. And all of these transactions are logged and tracked on these open source online databases, which are known as blockchains. To kind of conceptualize that, you can think of like Apple's iCloud system or of Google's Drive programs. And currently, cryptocurrency is mostly an investment opportunity, while there are some opportunities for using it as a form of payment for services, this is still fairly minimal. And again, because crypto is not backed by any guarantees or anything, the market is extremely volatile. So earlier this year, there was a huge market crash, and we saw people where their entire savings were wiped out by this very volatile market. And all of these coins are produced using something called crypto mining. So just like it's an untraditional currency, this is also untraditional mining. And because it is so decentralized and deregulated, there's no governments or banks overseeing these transactions, the industry had to develop these methods to validate them and the coin production itself to kind of limit the amount of bad actors getting involved in it. So the biggest among these is proof of work. It's the most popular, and Bitcoin, the most popular coin, also uses it. Unfortunately, it's also the most energy intensive of the processes. So it requires miners to use these extremely high technologically advanced computers, which you can see here, to solve these complex math problems as quickly as possible to basically produce a coin. The first computer that manages to solve it is rewarded with the Bitcoin. So essentially, there's thousands of these computers around the world racing to solve the equation, but it's only the first computer that gets there to actually receive the coin. All of the other ones are using all of this energy and basically getting nothing. And what we know is this is really for profit. These computers are running for profit as it is an investment opportunity. And it also is putting this massive prohibitive cost behind actually entering the market. So meaning that a lot of the market is consolidating. So for instance, about 7 firms own 80% of the mining market. And this is a dangerous trend that we've seen in a lot of different industries before, with corresponding environmental impacts where it's just financial gain for a select few. Now, many of you have maybe heard of the alternative mining mechanisms. So for example, there's proof of stake. It's far less energy intensive, but there's still cause for concerns, and it may be more unequal than the proof of work system. And for example, the second most popular coin, which is called Ethereum, recently shifted to proof of stake, essentially slashing their emissions overnight. And that's really good. We definitely want to see that. But there's also a host of other problems that we'll hear from in our panelists in more detail. And the other problem is that Bitcoin, which is the largest, shows no sign of slowing down. There's no sign that they're going to change, partly because so much cost has already been sunk into this proof of work method. So meaning we're still left with the huge energy problems associated with crypto. And it's no surprise that this level of energy demand means major emissions, because you're pulling from fossil fuel dominated grids globally and you're producing these emissions. So for example, in the US alone, Bitcoin mining resulted in 40 billion pounds of CO2 in 2020. And keep in mind, that's just in the US and just in 2020. So the historic emissions of this are far, far larger. And this means that Bitcoin alone is producing the emissions on scale with a mid-sized country like, say, Norway or Thailand. In addition to emissions, we're also seeing it's producing electronic waste on scale with mid-sized countries. So like I said, because the field has become so competitive and so technologically advanced, it needs these special computers called ASIC computers that essentially have no other purpose outside of mining. So you can't really reuse them for just regular computer usage. It's solely for this, which means that once they reach the end of their useful life, or once a new technology comes out, they're basically just become obsolete. And the typical lifespan of them is only 1.5 years. So it's pretty easy to imagine how much waste is being generated constantly by this industry. And we also know that in addition to the environmental ramifications, there's also huge human impacts to this level of electronic waste being produced. And the final piece of this puzzle is how the industry is really teaming up with big oil for these joint profits. Part of that issue is with grid overconsumption. So that's when these miners, typically based in a specific area or putting all their computers into one region, will overwhelm the grid because they're using so much demand of energy. And this has, immediate impacts on everyday consumers. It could mean there's no heat available in the winter, or AC in the summer, or nothing for industry, or what have you. And even if there are renewable sources on the grid, it's possible that the demand for just the crypto will overwhelm them and put pressure to bring more fossil fuels online, only to support the crypto mining. And this is something we've seen in other countries. Other countries have gone so far as to ban cryptocurrency altogether because of this harmful environmental practices. But another more insidious way that they're going around this is just going straight to the source. So if the miners want the cheapest source of energy, what's cheaper than really going straight to where it's produced? This could mean going out to oil drilling fields and basically setting up shop right on the fields right next door, buying off the excess gas from these oil corporations that would otherwise be burned off or flared. And we've seen proponents of cryptocurrency kind of boast this and say this is good, that it helps these oil drillers to cut down on their methane emissions because they're not burning it off directly to the atmosphere. But that's kind of unrealistic in that the emissions are still being produced to create the energy. And it really only monetizes this process because now what was once a loss for the company, it now becomes a profit, and they're just going to keep drilling. And secondly, it could also mean going out to dying or close down power plants. Miners will make deals with these power plants where they'll buy all of their energy and become their sole customer. And this means that the plant and the miners are both profiting. But as we're going to hear a lot from our panelists today, local communities are really suffering at the hands of these miners because of emissions and nearby pollution as they skyrocket. So this was just a very, very brief overview into the world of cryptocurrency. But overall, we know it's very dangerous for our climate and our communities. And I will turn it back to Kate now, and our panelists will go into much more detail about all of this information. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat, for giving us that lay of the land. And as she said, now we're going to turn to our panelists to dive a little deeper. So our panelists tonight are all leaders in our effort in New York to pass a moratorium on crypto mining. So I hope everyone will please join me in welcoming Alex Beecham, Yvonne Taylor, and Abby Buddington. Alex is Food and Water Watch's Northeast Region Director and leads our organizing campaigns to stop fossil fuel projects. Yvonne is the co-founder and vice president of Gas Free Seneca and the founder of Seneca Lake Guardian, a Waterkeeper affiliate. And Abby is a resident of the Finger Lakes region and is the secretary for the committee to preserve the Finger Lakes. So welcome, and thank you all so much for being here tonight for this important conversation. So to start us off, as Kat explained for us just now, oftentimes we're seeing these crypto mining operations partnering with shuttered or failing power plants to either keep them open or reopen them as a source of cheap energy for their mining operations. And we've seen this happen in New York. So can you explain what's happening with the Greenwich power plant, which is located in the Finger Lakes? And Alex, maybe if you want to give us the backstory there.
Yeah. So as you just alluded to, there's this kind of persistent problem of this happening around the country where companies are buying up old power plants. So as we transition away from coal and to a lesser extent natural gas, there are a lot of old power plants just sort of sitting around, right? And so what happened at Greenwich is this old coal plant was sitting there, and the company bought it, refired it with natural gas, and then starts just sending all that power to power their Bitcoin mining operations. So the environmental cost of this, Kat just went through, but it's particularly dire when you think about what these plants are. These are the things many of us fought for years and years to close, and the Bitcoin or other crypto mining operations can just sort of swoop in, refire the dirtiest, oldest power plants. And there's not a heck of a lot in the short term folks can do about it. As Yvonne and Abby know, we've been fighting with them really hard to shut this power plant down and to stop new ones from doing the same thing. But so that's what's happened at Greenwich. They've taken this power plant on the banks of Seneca Lake, truly beautiful place, refired it, and now are sending all that power, benefiting no one at all except the owners of the actual power plant, the owners of the Bitcoin mining operation.
Thanks for sharing that, Alex. And Yvonne and Abby, you're both residents of the Seneca Lake region where this power plant is. So could you share, how these mining operations are impacting your local communities?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking the time to shine a light on this very important issue. We greatly appreciate it. So Greenwich, when they first started, said that they were coming in as a data center. And what we quickly found out was it was not a data center, and it was creating tremendous air pollution that's harming our very precious air that grapes are super, it's a wine and tourism region, so grapes are very, very susceptible, as well as our own human health. Greenwich is permitted to withdraw up to 139 million gallons per day into their operation, and then they discharge the water at temperatures of up to 108 degrees, which into a trout stream. And that is super harmful to the aquatic life. Fish get challenged at temperatures of 70 degrees. So we've got, air pollution, we've got thermal pollution, we've got water pollution with potentially toxic chemicals. And the DEC, which is our Department of Environmental Conservation, just recently gave Greenwich permission to actually go forward with these fish screens that they have been required for over 5 years to need to install as a condition of their permit. So at the 9th or 11th hour, rather, the DEC, made this deal with them. So we are working super hard to stop this in our community. And I often say this shouldn't be a town by town fight. It also shouldn't be a state by state fight. This is something that everybody needs to be aware of what's going on. And unfortunately, in our community, it also can be quite divisive, especially when the reporting isn't fair and balanced. And sadly, we don't have all the time fair and balanced reporting. So we're super concerned. There are a lot of problems, like I've said, and Yvonne, you might have some others that I haven't thought of.
Sure. Thank you, Abby. And thanks to all of you for organizing this and for being here tonight. It certainly is the Wild West for crypto mining here in the United States without any environmental oversight or regulation. And the Greenwich facility, as Abby pointed out, is exploiting our clean air and water, harming our businesses, our thriving tourism industry in the Finger Lakes region, hurting our community's health, along with the planet. Greenwich's power plant now burns 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to power its Bitcoin mining operation. And despite the fact that the Department of Environmental Conservation did deny Greenwich's Title V air permit because it violates New York's climate law, Greenwich is continuing to expand and operate while it appeals that decision. When it's done, this one facility will emit over 1 million tons of CO2 equivalents into the atmosphere every year and burn as much energy as 100,000 homes, just to make a flailing virtual currency for the very few, very rich that it serves. In New York, we are supposed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030, but we literally can't get there if Bitcoin mining remains unchecked. The plant's emissions are also harmful to crops. In one of New York State's largest agriculturally producing counties, it's the breadbasket of New York. These mines, which are made up of automated machines, as Kat mentioned, don't create a significant amount of jobs, but in fact, they could actually cost us thousands of jobs and seriously harm the industry that is the heart of the Finger Lakes, which is tourism. Tourism in the Finger Lakes makes up 17% of New York State's tourism outside of New York City. Greenwich only employs 48 people, which is comparable to about your average McDonald's franchise. And yet the agriculture and tourism industry in the region supports 60,000 jobs and generates $3 billion into New York State's economy every year. And all of that depends heavily on clean air and clean water for survival. Not to mention that 100,000 people depend on Seneca Lake for their drinking water. So the consequences of mining Bitcoin, they don't just affect the folks in the Finger Lakes, they affect every New Yorker, and the climate impacts go far beyond our borders. The governor needs to sign the moratorium bill, which we're going to talk about again later today. And we need other states to follow New York's lead. But also we need federal legislation on this industry if we're ever going to achieve national climate goals. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. It's really powerful to hear that testimony. And I think it's, just yet another example of industry putting their own profits over public health and the health of our environment, which is why it's so important that we're working to stop it. And so I know that Food and Water Watch has been working with both of you and with the larger coalition to shut down this plant. So is there anything you'd like to share about the work that's being done to stop this plant specifically?
Yeah, well, with the thanks of the tremendous help from Food and Water Watch and some other statewide organizations, we have developed a very, very strong environmental coalition across New York State. And as a result of all that work and collaboration, we were able to submit 4,000 comments to the DEC about the Greenwich Title V air permit. 98% of those comments were in favor of opposing the renewal of that permit. And after months and months of continuing to voice our concerns, the DEC finally denied the Title V air permit for the Greenwich facility, which was a huge win. But as I mentioned, Greenwich is continuing to operate as they appeal this decision and trying to drag their heels, all the while continuing to harm our fish and aquatic life, our atmosphere, and our region for private financial gain. And they also have a water withdrawal and discharge permit coming up for renewal. Sadly, it seems like one hand of the DEC doesn't know what the other hand is doing, and they're giving Greenwich, as Abby mentioned, a pass on a lot of their work. Their permit expired on September 30th, and Greenwich gave them an extension at the 11th hour to continue. So we're hoping that we can get some help with folks on that as well, because really the Greenwich facility is a test case for how the rest of the power plants that are either underutilized or decommissioned are, going to go forward with crypto mining. So we need all of us to focus our attention on Greenwich and make that test case win for New Yorkers.
Great, thank you. And, as Abby said earlier, this can't just be a plant by plant, state by state issue. So I know that we're also working more broadly to pass a moratorium on crypto mining in the entire state of New York. And so we do actually have a video message from New York Assembly member Anna Kellis, who wrote the moratorium legislation and has been a leader on this issue. So what I'd like to do is play that video now so we could hear a little bit about the moratorium legislation, and then we will discuss that further as a group. So let me go ahead and get that queued up for us.
My name is Anna Kellis, and I am a New York State Assembly member representing an area in the center of New York State, the Finger Lakes, and specifically Tompkins County and Cortland County. And actually 5 years ago, as a county legislator, when I was the chair of Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality, was the first time that I started to learn about cryptocurrency mining when our power plant was being converted to a data center. And now we're seeing this movement where cryptocurrency mining companies, these are large private or publicly traded companies, are coming in the back door, buying up these power plants and converting them into behind the meter energy generation for their cryptocurrency mining purposes. So we now actually have the one Greenwich, we have a second one that's in the process of expanding, also in a power plant. And because we have all of these others, I created a bill in New York State that basically said, here is this new technology. We are seeing that it uses more energy than any of the new technologies that we've seen in recent years. And we do not know the magnitude yet of the environmental impact. So let's just put a pause on allowing these large-scale corporations in buying up these mothballed power plants throughout the state, and then require our environmental agency, the Department of Environmental Conservation, to do a broad evaluation of the impact of the cryptocurrency mining industry on our ability to reach our climate goals, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So that is really the foundation. It's very narrow. It is focused on proof of work, because proof of work is the one form of validation that uses a tremendous amount of energy. So this bill made it through the Senate and the Assembly because it is so focused on the environmental impacts. It is focused on just the power plants, and particularly large-scale corporations. So it does not impact small-scale boutique individuals. It doesn't impact cryptocurrency mining that is not in power plants. So that's what I mean by being very focused and very narrow. And it requires this environmental assessment that we deeply need for the state. It passed the Senate, it passed the Assembly with great appreciation, and thank you to Food and Water Watch that was with us as legislators every single step of the way, doing the huge amount of education of the public on what is cryptocurrencies, what are forms of validation, which was a huge hurdle, and then working day by day by day to help fight against millions of dollars of lobbying dollars that came into New York State to fight this very modest bill. We succeeded. It passed the Assembly and it passed the Senate, and we have one final step, and all we need is for the governor to sign this bill into law. And not only will we protect or prevent all of these power plants from being converted into cryptocurrency mining company benefit, but we will also get the important data that we need to show that the impact of this industry may prevent us from reaching our environmental goals. So if anyone wants to move this type of legislation in their states across the country, this is a model movement that we have had. Thank you to Food and Water Watch. And I'm sure throughout this whole meeting, you'll get a tremendous amount of very important information to take this a step further. So hopefully we'll all band together and we'll get this through in the next couple months into law in New York State. I have every confidence that we will be able to do it. Thank you all so much for joining this meeting and caring about this issue.
All right. Yeah, thanks to leadership from Assemblymember Anna Kellis for this important moratorium legislation. As she mentioned, it's passed both the House and the Senate and the New York State Legislature. So I'll open up the floor now to our panelists just to hear more from you about what this bill will mean from New Yorkers and what the next steps are for getting it passed.
Yeah, I mean, I can start, I guess. So we're, we were really, really honored and had the privilege, I think, to work alongside Yvonne and Abby and a bunch of really local groups on this that really led the way from like noticing that this was happening and then ultimately getting to a solution that could pass a moratorium statewide. And I really want to focus on that because I think that and Anna Kellis, who we just heard from, who was an unbelievable sponsor on a bill that should be really simple and easy, but in reality was incredibly difficult and hard. And what's cool about this is that it really is a kind of like classic people versus money story, right? Like we got this bill through both houses in, I know we have a lot of New Yorkers on the call. For those who aren't in New York has kind of like a notoriously corrupt legislature, and it is difficult to move things against corporate interests. We did it in a way that in the only way you can fight big corporate money, which is by having everyday people go to their legislators over and over and over again and just have that kind of overwhelming pressure beat big money. And I feel like you hear often about like, the other side on whatever issue having a lot of money. I want to drill down a little bit in what that means here. So The crypto industry spent more money against this than anything we worked on this session. And there were a lot of environmental bills moving in New York last year. They really, really pulled out all the stops. And that means not just hiring an army of lobbyists, but having campaign contributions up and down to Republicans, to Democrats, all the way up to Governor Hochul, to Lieutenant Governor, everybody. To give you a sense of how kind of pernicious this whole thing is, the chair in the Senate of the committee the bill went through left office early. And when he left office early, he went to a lobbying firm that does a lot of work for the crypto industry. The top Senate staffer for the majority leader left this year after like a couple decades in office and went to a firm to go do crypto work. So it just shows that when we talk about big money, they really, really pulled out all the stops and it just didn't matter in the end. So that's, I think, just incredibly exciting and a show. I say all that not to be depressing, but to say, like, if you build a people power movement, you can overcome all of that stuff and overcome the millions of dollars the industry will spend. So that's a little bit about how we, I think, did it. The next steps are pretty simple. So it passed both houses of the legislature. We desperately need Governor Hochul to sign the bill. She has made no, at least to my mind, no insinuation one way or another of whether she will or will not. We did get the permit denied that Yvonne mentioned earlier, which was also ultimately a decision from Governor Hochul. So you could see that as at least a good sign that she felt the pressure on that issue. But we need to keep the pressure up. There's no doubt about it. So there's a couple things folks can do. If you're in New York, I apologize if you're not in New York. If you are, though, we're organizing two big things, so I have to tell you about them. One is next week, we'll be outside the one and only debate for governor, just to have a really big presence and to tell her to be a climate leader, including signing this bill. That is this coming Tuesday evening. It's in New York City at Pace University, Lower Manhattan. It'll be really, really fun is another reason you should come. We also are going to hold a big rally November 15th at her office just about this single issue, saying sign the bill. Really simple, big rally also in Manhattan. Really, really fun. So come to that stuff. And then the other thing is we have an action alert right now where people can take action and simply click a button and say, sign this bill right now. That stuff really matters. The sort of drumbeat, the thousands of petitions that were mentioned earlier, or DEC comments, all that stuff really adds up, and the kind of constant drumbeat is the way we won in the legislature, and I think the way that will ultimately win her signature as well. So do all that stuff. It'll be really fun.
Can I also share? Thank you,
yeah, of course.
Alex, so much. There's also a dedicated phone line that you can call for Governor Hochul, and I suggest that anybody from anywhere can call, and you can just tell her to sign a bill. So I can put that in the chat in a second. And then I also wanted just to say that the call relays that we had were super impactful, you know, at the 9th hour with the legislature, specifically our Senate. And so it's just super important never to give up. That's, you know, certainly a message that we learned for sure on this one. And the other thing I wanted to say about the legislation itself is that it is holding a year for the DEC to study the industry as a whole. And I think that is probably the most likely reason why the cryptocurrency mining lobbyists spent so much money for that not to happen. And if they are doing that, it's just sort of interesting, because why would they do that if it wasn't a huge and important and environmentally harmful thing?
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear how through all of this grassroots organizing that in New York, you were able to get this legislation passed. And I know that with the continued support of folks on this call and folks in the coalition that we'll be able to get the governor to sign this. So thank you everybody who has been a part of this movement so far. And, you know, Alex touched on this. We do have a lot of folks on this call who are not from New York. And obviously, crypto mining is not just a problem in New York. We are seeing this elsewhere. So outside of New York, where are we seeing crypto mining operations trying to gain footholds? Or what should people be on the lookout for to prevent it from starting up in their own communities?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly not isolated to New York. The crypto mining industry is spreading like a cancer across the country. We're finding miners in Kentucky, Georgia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina. And so it's really a chronic problem that the entire country needs to address. And so, you know, one of the things I would recommend to anybody listening is to be on the lookout for proposals for things like data centers. That's the cover they'll often use, or a science center. If you hear of anything like that, really dig in and find out what's happening for sure. And also, you know, Seneca Lake Guardian has sort of formed a ragtag coalition of people across the country who meet on a monthly basis to share stories and strategize ways that we can get some federal legislation. So if you do, you know, think that there is some concern for this coming into your community, anywhere there where there's cheap energy, you're susceptible, you know, reach out to us or folks at Food and Water Watch and see how we can continue to build this coalition.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting to hear that the data center is their cover. I think that's a good tip for people to be on the lookout for. And so just because this is an issue that impacts us nationally, what do you all think needs to happen on a broader scale to put more limits on crypto mining? Or is there anything that could be done, or are there ways that this New York moratorium can be used as a model in other states?
Want me to take this one? I'll start and then everybody else can pitch in, feel free. But I do think that we need to urge our lawmakers on the federal level to draft some comprehensive federal legislation on the energy consumption used by cryptocurrency mining. We have some amazing reports, one from the White House Office of Technology and Science that outlines all of the harmful ways and the energy, massive energy use from cryptocurrency mining. And complementing that, we have a extremely comprehensive guidebook that was just released by the Earth Justice and Sierra Club that talks about all of the harmful impacts of cryptocurrency mining, and also addresses some of the claims from the crypto industry and debunks them. So I would recommend getting a hold of that guidebook, looking for the White House report on cryptocurrency mining, and banding together. I mean, I kind of look at it like when the gas guzzling Humvees came out, we were very concerned about how much gas those vehicles were consuming. We didn't ban Humvees, but what we did was we established a mile per gallon requirement, and it sort of was effective in you know, reducing the amount of Humvees that we saw on the roads. I think we could do a similar thing with cryptocurrency mining and require that if this industry is to continue, it has to have a limit on how much energy it consumes. And I'm hoping that our lawmakers will do something like that.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was thinking about is on the local level too. So definitely be in touch on a federal level with all of your legislators, but then also on the local level, there are ways to create codes or regulations that will not be favorable to this energy intensive industry, or any other energy intensive industry that is to follow, right? Because we didn't know that this was going to be a thing, and we certainly don't know what the next thing is going to be. So in Missoula, Montana, there was an issue with cryptocurrency mining, and they actually created in their county regulations that made it so that it wasn't terribly favorable. And so Bitcoin miners or cryptocurrency proof of work cryptocurrency miners went elsewhere. So there are things that you can do on the very local level, as well as things you can do on the federal level too.
Yeah, that's all right. And what's cool about that is, I mean, in some ways it can seem overwhelming, like trying to fight at the national level, the state level, and the local level. But what's really cool to me is that they build on each other, right? So like victories at the local level up to ultimately giving you the strength you need to win at the state level to ultimately winning at the federal level. And that, I think, has been the case on issue after issue that we work on. And even outside of the environmental space, very often it has to kind of bubble up. And then as you're doing that, you're also organizing and building the kind of capacity you need to win. So yeah, it's an exciting issue in that sense that you can organize on it at kind of any level of government, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great to hear that there are already so many folks involved in those efforts on all three of those levels. And thank you for leading a lot of that work. So what we'll do now is we'll take a couple of questions from our audience, and some of these were submitted in advance and some have been coming in this evening. So we'll do a mix of some of those. And one of the first ones that we got is from Jean. The crypto industry is making claims about its effort to decarbonize. Is there any validity in this? I think, thinking of things like transitioning from proof of work to proof of stake.
As Kat mentioned in the beginning, Ethereum was just able to successfully complete a merge from proof of work to proof of stake, essentially reducing its energy consumption by about 99%, which to me signifies that this industry can be innovative and can, when pressured, move to a less energy consumptive model. And so I think we need to push for that. I think I also want to caution, though, that a lot of the crypto industry will greenwash their methods and make it sound like they're using carbon offsets or using sustainable energy to mine for crypto. That is, we thought in the beginning when we heard, oh, well, they're just going to use all renewable energy. What a great idea. But the problem is that those precious green electrons then go to the cryptocurrency industry and get taken away from everyday people who desperately need those renewable energy resources in order to transition off of fossil fuels in order to meet our climate change goals.
It's a good point, and it's an increasing problem, particularly now with the price of natural gas so high. So it allows you to greenwash if you're the company. It also is a lot cheaper at the moment, and I think that's what's really driving a lot of their energy use decisions. So if you can go find hydropower that's cheaper, they would happily go do it. But then it displaces that, right? So you got to replace it somewhere, which leads to more gas or something else being burned, which is obviously bad for the climate, but also bad for people's pocketbooks who would have got the renewable energy and are almost certainly now paying higher prices. So there's that piece also.
Just to add to that, Alex, there was a study recently that the one thing that a lot of people are starting to notice is that their energy bills are getting higher and higher. And there was a study by a Berkeley study that said that Bitcoin mining's power usage has increased electricity bills for everyday people in New York by $165 million a year, and businesses by another 79 million. So it's hurting us in our pockets as well.
Yeah, this definitely seems like a situation where no matter how they try to explain it away, it really is only serving their own profits and not benefiting us. So I'm seeing a little bit of chatter in the chat box about another impact that we haven't touched on yet, which is noise pollution. I think Abby, your committee to preserve Seneca Lake has done a little bit of research or study on that. If you want to talk a little bit about that impact from mining as well.
Sure. So usually one of the first things that people notice is the noise, even though that's not the most, the biggest problem, right? There's air pollution, there's all the other things, but what happens is the miners create a lot of noise because of the fans that cool them. And that noise actually does create human health harms. And there have been multiple studies around that and how, it creates actual physical harm to humans as well as emotional harm. And it certainly can disrupt, migratory patterns of birds and all sorts of other things as well. So the noise definitely is an impact for consideration.
Thanks for sharing that. Another question that I'm seeing in the Q&A box is there any information on how crypto compares to existing traditional financial systems, which we know can also have environmental impacts? Are there any resources you recommend people look into further?
I mean, I think that's a good point. I think that people have, especially in the cryptocurrency industry, have pointed to the banking industry as being equally as energy consumptive, if not more so. But I think that Assemblymember Kellis explains it best, that the banking system is accessed by billions and billions and billions of people, whereas the cryptocurrency industry is really now, not operating the way it was intended to operate, in that it was supposed to be something that folks who maybe have been disenfranchised by a centralized banking system would be able to access. So it was going to be kind of leveling the playing field. But in truth, what we're finding is that there are now only a very, very few holders of Bitcoin, and so it's become just a mechanism for the very, very few, very, very rich to play with. So comparably, it's really, you're comparing apples to oranges if you compare the traditional banking system's energy consumption use to cryptocurrency mining use, because of the difference in the numbers.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. Earlier, I can't recall who, but somebody mentioned that the energy use from these crypto mining operations can cause people to lose access to their own energy to heat their homes in the winter time or cool their homes in the summer during heat waves or cold snaps. So are there any laws that force them to pause their operations during those times of emergency to help protect residents?
I don't know if there are any laws per se, but the cryptocurrency industry, the Bitcoin mining industry, actually gets paid by municipalities to stop mining Bitcoin during times of high demand. So they're ending up making money no matter what. They're hogging the energy away, causing brownouts, blackouts in some areas. And then the government steps in and says, hey, we'll pay you extra money, more than what you're making mining Bitcoin, to just give us that energy back when we really need it. It's not a viable solution that I think anybody can agree on that.
Well, and I think, yeah, exactly, Yvonne. And I think the crazy part is they are actually taking the energy that is creating the issue, and then they're getting paid to stop it. Right? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's a super business model for whoever negotiated that, but it's certainly not sustainable and not good for people. So
Definitely. And let's see, another one. Kat mentioned this at the beginning as well, that the markets crashed recently and the value has gone down significantly. Is that a good sign for us? Does that, indicate to us that crypto is on its way out?
Well, I can say that watching the Greenwich stock tank has been remarkable. And we've seen that the CEO has recently resigned. Bankruptcy seems almost inevitable at this point. And the whole market itself is extremely volatile. It doesn't mean it'll stay that way. But right now, it certainly looks like a risky investment that I don't think anybody should count on.
Yeah, it's hard to know if it's the end or not the end, but it's a sign that it's incredibly volatile, right? I mean, it's crashed before and come back up, so who knows really what will happen, but yeah, and I agree, the Greenwich stuff has been really fascinating to see. I just there's a Finger Lakes article about this, about the CEO resigning, that's worth reading if folks are interested, because it is sort of remarkable, and is, at least in the short term, I mean, I think I said something flippant earlier, like, we're using all this energy and it's for no one's benefit except to make a little money for a few people. They're not even really doing that at the moment, right? Like, the companies are cratering themselves. So it's sort of remarkable, like even that very narrow interest isn't panning out at the moment anyway.
Yep. And Kate, I just want to circle back to the noise issue. And if people go up in the chat, Mary Finneran, thank you, Mary, for posting. There was a great article that actually shows I don't know what kind of map, but it shows the noise visually, but then you can also hear it. So if you don't happen to have the good fortune to live next to a cryptocurrency mining operation, then you too can hear what we hear. So.
And I know that there have been a lot of really great resources shared in the chat tonight, so I'll be sure to get a roundup of all those links and make sure that those get shared out with everybody who's here tonight. All right, so we're coming up to the top of the hour here, so I just want to see if any of you have any final closing thoughts that you want to share with the audience tonight.
Well, I guess the only thing I can say is that here we are in the middle of a global climate crisis. We're seeing things happen every day that point to this crisis. It's inevitable that we have to make some drastic changes, and to imagine that there are fossil fuel burning plants burning more fossil fuels and emitting more greenhouse gases in the middle of this climate crisis to make fake money feels literally insane. And I think we really need to make it a priority for all of us to work together to regulate this industry and do it fast.
I agree. And I'd also say that it is in New York State, Governor Hochul needs to sign the legislation, and we need to do more. On a federal level, I hope that President Biden somehow magically hears this and gets to work to make a difference so that the US can be a global leader. We need to act, and we need to act now.
Great. I don't have anything to add other than to thank Yvonne and Abby, both for joining, but maybe more importantly, for all your work. I think it's been a truly incredible campaign that continues, and we couldn't go through all this because we'd be here all night, but they've been doing this work from before Greenwich as well, and been fighting the fossil fuel industry for an awfully long time. And over and over and over again, they've won, and I'm confident that we'll ultimately win this too. So anyway, thank you so much for all your work.
We couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I hope our audience will join me in thanking you for taking the time to share your expertise with us on these issues tonight. And as Alex said, for everything that you're doing to stop this and pass this moratorium in New York. And I also want to thank everybody who's on this call for listening and participating today. You know, as we've heard, it really is the power of people, the power of organizing that makes a difference. And so it's so important that all of you are here to learn more and to learn how you can get involved. You know, this is a really complex issue, but we're going to keep building momentum and making sure that more people know about this and know more about how they can get engaged in this important fight. So as we wrap up, I'm just going to reiterate a couple of resources and opportunities to share with you. A great initial way that you can help educate more people on this topic is by reading and sharing an article that Kat wrote that covers a lot of the information she shared at the beginning of this talk. So we'll put that link in the chat for you. And if you are in New York, I encourage you to join us for the rally next Tuesday that Alex mentioned earlier in the call to help us put pressure on Governor Hochul to sign the crypto mining moratorium. We'll drop that link to RSVP in the chat, and we also have a link where you can send a message to urge her to sign the legislation. We also have ways for folks who are not in New York to get more involved with our volunteer activities. We have volunteer activities in states across the country and tons of virtual opportunities as well. We'll put the link in the chat to our volunteer dashboard so you can see all of those upcoming events. And a great first place to start is our monthly central volunteer meetings where you can connect virtually and plug into the movement no matter where you are. You can also make a gift to Food and Water Watch to strengthen our campaigns to fight the fossil fuel industry. Especially now, we're seeing corporations profiting off of global crises by price gouging us, all while making record profits for themselves. And your support really allows us to work at the local, state, and national level to take on these fights against these corporations. And this month we have a matching gift opportunity. So this means all new monthly gifts to Food and Water Watch are being matched by a generous donor, $2 for every $1 donated. And so this is just an incredibly powerful way to increase your impact and ensure that we can achieve policies that protect our communities and our planet. So we'll put a link in the chat where you can make a gift, or you can text the word gift to the number 23321. And finally, I hope that we'll continue to see you at Livable Future Live. We host events like these every month, and we'll be meeting again next month on November 16th after the election to recap the results and our goals going forward. And then in December, we'll be celebrating our progress and looking ahead to 2023. So we'll put the link in the chat where you can sign up for these and other upcoming events in the series. So with that, I just want to thank everybody again for being here today. Later this evening, you'll get an email or a text message asking you to submit feedback about today's event. Please leave us a comment. Your feedback is really helpful to us. And then later this week, I will be sending out the recording and the links we shared in the chat so that you can have access to all of those resources and all of the ways that you can take action. So keep an eye out for that as well. So yeah, thank you again. And I hope that you all have a great evening.